in Texas. Where do you guys live?
Brazil, we're in the jungle.
Yes.
Very cool. So is that a real background?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It
It's
is.
pretty much the first question we get every time.
I lived in Rio for like 10 months at one point when I was in my 20s.
How come?
I was just kind of like trying to live that like 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss dream. And it was cool. It was cool. I think like, I was in such a different headspace at my life then that like I probably I would do Brazil differently than I did it then. Put it like that.
Well, I hope at least you took the opportunity to surf and do all sorts of things that Rio has to offer.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. It was very,
Yeah.
very cool.
Nice. I also like your plants behind your back. Those are prosperity plants that we have in the garden.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing. I'll take it. I thought it was they call them snake plants in Austin.
Yeah.
That's how it's called.
There are several names for it. So in Brazil, the most common name for it, the swords of Saint George. And then you've got snake plant. You've also called mother-in-law's tongue, along with snake plants. So, but then
Very
like
cool.
have a spiritual significance, like in the religions here, it's for when you place it outside the house, it's for cleansing negative energy, and when you place it inside the house, it's for attracting prosperity.
Mm.
I think I need to get one for both.
Yeah.
Nice. So anyway, I came across your work actually completely randomly. I was looking for some infographics months ago, and somehow your infographic came somehow like in my awareness, something to do with alignment, I think it was. And I was like, who is this Scott person? I want to learn a little bit more. And then I learned a little bit about your journey when it comes to what you have done in the past, the businesses and all of that. And also that you currently talk a lot about consciousness. And then we were listening to one of your interviews that you had maybe 2 months ago, something like this, back in September. And you were talking about ayahuasca. And as he worked in the retreat center of ayahuasca, we were like, okay, we really have to talk to this guy. So that's basically the idea, to have this conversation just easy flowing and sharing also what your experiences have been when it comes to entrepreneurial journey, when it comes to your spiritual journey, when it comes to also prosperity, exactly what's behind your back there in the plants. So that's the idea behind, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Sounds great. excited and looking forward to it.
Awesome. So the first question I would like to ask, exactly to set the base and the foundation, is where would you say is important to start this conversation when it comes to maybe your entrepreneurial journey, maybe your awakening journey, maybe your spiritual journey, whatever you feel comfortable to share to begin with?
I think it's an interesting question of like, why does someone want to become an entrepreneur? And I think depending upon where you are in your consciousness journey, the answer is very different. When I reflect on my own journey, I graduated college and the Social Network movie came out about Facebook. And it was like, this montage of a bunch of kids doing some things, then all of a sudden being rich, right? And like being famous and doing all this stuff. And, I think like a lot of very ambitious, hard charging type people that are attracted to something difficult like entrepreneurship, the real reason is it's almost like a way to invalidate low self-esteem. And so for me, I only learned this after my consciousness work, but there was this part of myself, part of my inner material that deep down behind all the stories didn't feel like it was enough. It felt like it needed to prove itself And if you could prove yourself in the entrepreneurship arena, then yeah, it was a way of invalidating that idea. And obviously, the things that are around it, like, quote unquote success and money and all that kind of stuff, are just other kind of external oriented sources of self-worth that our culture tells us, that are indicators that we're worthy, we're enough. And so I think for me, like, that was the big driver, unconscious driver, to do all the entrepreneurship stuff. And I didn't even realize it. And when I did, I was like, whoa, that makes so much sense. Shit.
How long ago was that?
That was probably 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like a couple years on the journey at that point, but I still didn't see that. I still couldn't see that. I didn't have the awareness to see it until a couple years ago.
What was the breakthrough?
The breakthrough was, so I had an experience where I had gotten very ill. Like, I basically had chronic fatigue. I many days I found it very difficult to work, to do anything. And it was very tough because I was kind of dealing with this while I was running my business. And there was immense frustration because I had gone from someone that had a ton of vitality, had been, always an athlete, and been able to go from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m, just go, 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 to like not being able to do very basic things. And I remember sitting on the couch being so frustrated that I couldn't do stuff, that I voiced to my partner, I was like, I feel fucking worthless. And it was almost like, as soon as I said it, there was a part of me that realized that there was some truth in that statement. And I was reading a book about psychosomatic health at the time, called The Divided Mind by Dr. John Sarno. He's written a very famous book called Healing Back Pain. But essentially the ideas are like, unconscious suppressed emotions are like the source of physical illness in many instances, and back pain specifically for him, that was his specialty. And I was like, wow, okay, there's something there. I literally just said this deep truth. And I went into meditation later that day, and I had this very clear memory of some kid in kindergarten basically telling me I was a worthless piece of shit. And I don't know if that was the formative imprint for that, like, I'm not enough idea, but that was certainly a prominent one. And, after that point, like, my strategy of the ego basically became to be the best at everything. And that was how I disproved that. And so it was a very, very fascinating thing to look back on your life, because I had this sense of perfectionism, and, it was always like the best student, the best athlete, like tried to be the best at everything. And I always thought it was because I liked, like, I had done a good job and I had gotten a reward, and like I wanted to get more of it. But like, that actually wasn't the real reason. The real reason was because there was a sense of not enoughness, not, a sense of deficit.
Which basically also brings me then to ask you, what's your take on greatest, good for all, and spiritual wealth? And there's a lot of people nowadays talking about exactly these topics, about how spirituality doesn't automatically mean being poor, and actually it can coexist. And it doesn't mean that you're being greedy, that you are being egotistic or anything like that. But in fact, you can create well-being for yourself while creating well-being for other people. So I'm curious to hear what's your take on spiritual wealth or wealth in general.
Yeah, I think my experience has been that like wealth is no longer as interesting as it once was. Like I really thought wealth was like, the key linchpin to so much in life. And, like I just think about like, what do I really want? And it's like so not in the top things. Um, so like what I think happens is that a lot of people on the spiritual path that are at very high levels of consciousness, um, the reason that you don't have a common archetype of that being wealthy is because they don't give a shit about wealth. You know what I mean? It's like somebody once said, like, to me, I forget where I read this. It's like if you're an alchemist and you could produce a gold bar anytime you want, you don't really need to carry around a bunch of gold bars. And I heard this other really cool podcast recently on abundance by this Vedic teacher, and he was talking about the most abundant man he ever met. And there was a story about like this reporter. He lived in a cave in India, and this reporter basically went and visited the cave and was like, "Oh my gosh, like you're amazing. Like I want to fly you out to London because everyone would love you and you can do all these presentations and my company will pay for it all." And he just looks at her and he goes, "I am London." And the abundance is the consciousness, like the wealth is in the consciousness that can basically allow you to experience whatever you want to experience when you want to experience it, and be at ease and peaceful and loving and joyous. And so like, yeah, I think like there's nothing incompatible about spirituality and wealth. I just think it becomes a less primary interest as the consciousness expands.
It's
And
more like
so,
a byproduct of what you are actually aiming for when it comes to creating a healthy and happy, content inner well-being or ecosystem, as well as external happy, content, healthy ecosystem. And then wealth, the tangible magic that you were talking about is more like a byproduct of that, or could be.
yeah, I think that's right. It could be, like, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean it isn't, or it doesn't mean it is, but it could. And I think like my observation is like the prosperity seems to flow when I'm in alignment of like what I'm supposed to be doing. Things are easy. And
I'm curious, if this is not your priority, what is?
my priority is self-realization.
Okay, then I have a question for you. What after that?
I don't
Suppose you
know.
become self-realized today. What do you think happens after?
I guess I don't need to know.
Mhm. Hmm.
You know what I mean? I think like that future oriented concern, right, is like kind of the whole antithesis of what we're trying to move into, which is being with the unfolding and experiencing it fully. And so I mean, I guess like I don't really know, and I don't really need to know. It's kind of how I feel.
You know why I asked that question is like I asked the question also to get your opinion, but I also want to make a point because I have been very deep in this journey for the last over 9 years now. And I realized that I kept pushing away self-realization.
Mm.
And there was a reason for it. And it was only in the last month that the localization of the consciousness shifted, as I said, into a self-realized being. And that shift made me realize that the whole perspective of not being future oriented is kind of pushing away the self-realization of into the future of like, it's not here now. And if you realize that you are self-realized, it's all about creation in the now. It's not about the future. And I feel like that's where the inner and outer world really meets, is in the self-realization. That now you're like, okay, now I am self-realized and this is the world I am in. What do I do with my world, inner and outer now? What do I want to create? Because for me, it's like, okay, uh, if we talk about levels of consciousness, you reach nirvana. Let's say you reach nirvana, which is bliss. You're in the bliss consciousness, you have dissolved. At the same time, you come back to this reality. So my whole teaching and uh, experience right now is about creating the return channel from nirvana to physical reality. What happens once you are self-realized? For me, that's the most interesting thing, is that now you are a free being, you are an actualized being. What do you do?
Mm.
I feel like that is a very unexplored field. Like, it's just like people just keep wanting nirvana and then what? And everyone's confused. And because there is that missing part, people just stay wanting nirvana and don't ever find it.
Well, I think, you know, the way that I look at it is like, I feel a genuine call in my heart right now to create things and to serve. And so, like, I'm writing this book, I have a podcast, a newsletter, and I just love doing these things because they put me into flow states. And so, and I feel like I get continued guidance that these are things I should be doing. So I kind of like, I think like the way I think about my, like I'm in active pursuit of those things. And as life continues to show me where my work is, and I have this daily choice each day, like of, okay, go work on the book, or like you just had something come up, go work on the consciousness. My priority is the consciousness. So that's what I do. But that doesn't mean I don't immediately go back to moving towards that which what I want to create in the world. And so, you know, I think it is an interesting point, right? Of like, if you're just chasing spiritual ascension, then what? Like, I guess my path is not one where that's the only thing I'm focused on. It's more of the householder experience as tradition. So I don't know, man, but like, that's cool that you're doing that work.
The another way to put it is that we are not humans ascending to a spiritual realization, that we are spiritual beings materializing into the physical reality. And that's why, it's like that shift in consciousness of I am a self-realized being creating this world. I am not a human seeking something. I am already, because it's to realize that you are that. That is your real identity. And the human is an illusion in itself.
what because my experience with this is like, I have my whole consciousness experience has been these moments of exposure to gradual deeper levels of embodiment. It's like a continuum, right? It's like that happened with like witness consciousness. It's happened with these moments of oh my gosh, I'm not in life, like I am life, like I am everything I see, like. But then it's like, there's a one step forward, then like two steps back, and then like, there's that experience, and it hasn't stabilized, I would say. What triggered that in the past month for you, that stabilization that you're describing of the self-realization?
In a way, it's a decision. to,
Hmm.
to fix your consciousness into that field. Like it's like you just stop bullshitting with yourself, and you stop telling yourself, I am a human seeking self-realization. It's like you kill that story within yourself and you just start with the new story that I am already the self-realized being, embodying this body. And it just keeps happening more. It just accelerates from that point on. It's like it for me it's just it comes down to a story shift, because I realized that was the only thing, was that identification. I think that's the key word, is identification. Is what does your consciousness identify with? And that identification is simply a story. The moment you start identifying with the self-realized being, which you can find, it can take you a second to find it. If you go into that deep meditation, you know who you are. And in that moment, if you say, I am this, and you never lie to yourself again and say, oh, I'm just a human without consciousness seeking something. If you stop lying to yourself, you are that already. So for me, it's like the lies ended, the story ended. It was
Hmm.
just, this is who I am. And like I said, the human layers don't disappear, but where you are dealing with them from change. It's not the human dealing with human issues. It's a self-realized being dealing with these programs that have been taken on from the outside world. Because that, for me, that's all that human is just several layers of programming, or patterns, as you call it. But you just stop identifying with those patterns and say, okay, I am not that. And
So it's interesting. So like when life shows you, I just would be curious just to get um, your perspective on this. So like, so you feel like you don't get triggered anymore, period.
that's not, no, that's my whole point, is that even if it's not I am getting triggered, it's a program is being awakened inside me, or a program is being awakened in the consciousness. And now how do I deal with that awakened
Right.
program?
Well, I feel like that too, but I don't like, I'm the watcher of the program, but I don't think that means I'm self-realized.
Mhm. But what is stopping you from thinking that?
Well, I know what the experience is like when I feel like I am all of the things that I see. And I know what it feels like to be the watcher of patterns, because I just see it all day long. And I don't know that the texture of the experience is the same.
I feel like, it again comes down to that we create a story of what a self-realized being is. Or the self-realized being is only when I am in that state, instead of the self-realized being is much more. It's what would a self-realized being experience as a human would be different from just being in that state of, okay, I am this. So like the active experience of a self-realized being, in my opinion, is different. It is someone who can maintain that witness consciousness and deal with those programs in an active state. I don't need to go and sit in meditation to deal with this. I am, it's everything is happening at the same time. It's like a multi-dimensional experience.
What I would add to that, like my perspective, is that it's no longer about perfection. And I think this is the thing that we trip on. And I also trip on this one from time to time, and probably more often than I would like to trip. But the thing is that no longer to judge yourself, that life is the imperfectly perfect life as it is, and you are already imperfectly perfect as you are. And instead of judging every single trigger that might have caused that activation of a pattern, you're like, okay, this is what's happening. I will deal with it from a higher consciousness or highest consciousness space, rather than judge it or feel like, oh, again, I failed, and feeling like a victim, like, oh, poor me, or why do I keep on tripping on the same situations over and over again. So to me, what it comes down to is being okay with what is, like you said earlier in the conversation, and accepting yourself for who you are with all of your flaws, with all of your perfections, and just really unifying it all into that unity of who you are in combination also with the universe as a whole, and being like, yeah, I am imperfectly perfect, and I accept it, and I unconditionally love it. And unconditional love doesn't automatically mean that it's just all perfect and there will be no patterns showing up, or there will be no triggers happening, and I will never have a conflict with my wife or a husband, and I will never feel angry at my child and stuff like that. Those things will happen. We are still, at the end of the day, still humans, but we are actually spirits having that human experience. And to me, that's what it's all about, like also listening to your conversations.
And she likes to say imperfectly perfect. I like to say perfectly imperfect. For me, that is the divine experience, is because if it is perfect, time ends, there is no reality to experience. It's the end of time in a sense. Like perfection is the end of time. And what keeps life going is that it's perfectly imperfect. It's just that tiny imbalance in the reality which produces the chaos which creates all of life experience. So for me, that is self-realization, is that this is the experience. This is the whole thing is the experience. It's not only when I'm in this, oh, I'm sitting in a cave, perfect. There's no triggers and I'm pure. No, it's in that play of life that the realization takes place.
It's like
That's my
enjoying
way.
the chaos, also enjoying the chaos and enjoying the being in the eye of the storm type of a situation, because life is life, and the world we live in is chaotic, and relationships are chaotic, and running businesses is chaotic. Like everything is chaotic at the end of the day, but it's how do we choose to experience that? Do we choose to embrace all of it with its chaotic nature, or do we keep on feeling like, oh, something is still missing, something is still, like, there's this scarcity, addiction to scarcity, addiction to something is missing, looking for that missing piece, and that is a never-ending story. And I mean, I have been there myself, and like I said, I also trip from time to time, but it's I think that's what you're talking about
Yeah,
when it comes to
and
self-realization.
really, I feel like the realization is that this is a game and you learn to play it and enjoy it fully. Like when we are in that state, for me, like the game includes feeling like shit once in a while, feeling angry once in a while. To really have that inner joy of the full experience of.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the kind of experience of, like, I think early on in my journey, there was a trying to do spirituality right was a pattern. And the way, and that was really the ego in disguise. And yeah, the kind of the way that it feels like now for me is like things come up and they're just things that come up. It's just kind of like, oh, there's another pattern. This is like what's next for me in my curriculum. And I think that's where maybe we have a difference of view, where as things come up for me, I'm like, oh, this is kind of what's next to my curriculum versus like, oh, I'm there and this is just a experience from that vantage point. So yeah, it's definitely interesting for me to contemplate your perspective. And it's not the perspective that's taught in my wisdom school. I'll just share that with you. Like there's basically like 5 levels of enlightenment in my wisdom school. And I think there's different depths of what you're talking about.
Yeah, of course, like when we are talking, 10-minute statement, like, in a few statements, you can't really express the depth of all of this. And there's so much depth do it. I was even listening or reading something. There was a blog post on Substack about Earth as a school, and take life as a lesson, and like this is my curriculum and all of that. And I have been in that mindset for a long time. And at some time it just started feeling like there's this concept of addiction to suffering. And it
Hmm.
felt like the ego makes the whole school perspective part of the addiction to suffering. And enlightenment and spirituality and all of it, just the ego just loves it because it can use anything. Like at the deepest layers of the ego, it can use anything to turn it into an addiction to suffering and to keep the egoic game going. And for me, it was really like reaching there and being like, I'm done. I'm done playing the games of the ego. I'm not entering that suffering again. So it was not easy. Like I said, it was 9 years of intense, like, battles and curriculum and lessons and all of that. But at the end of it, it was this, I get it. I get it and I snap out of it. And I'm never entering there again. So for me, that is the final light bulb moment. Okay.
Nice, man. That's awesome.
And I also want to ask the last thought, if you have anything to share that you would like to bring into this episode as the last statement of wisdom, or anything that comes through you.
I just think it's like, for anybody listening, it's like everybody's on their own journey. And there's however many billion people in the world, there's like that many billion paths to yeah, I guess find what you're looking for. So I'm grateful for you guys giving me an opportunity to just talk a little bit about my experience, and definitely enjoyed hearing about yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time and your presence, and speak to you soon.
All right, see you guys.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.